Hey everyone, thanks for being understanding today with the whole me being sick and being out. Today we're going to go over justice. This slide deck's mostly just focusing on the questions outside of what the video captured. So starting with fair opportunity rule. So the fair opportunity rule states that individuals should not receive social benefit on the basis of underserved advantageous properties and should not be denied social benefits on the basis of underserved disadvantageous properties because they are not responsible for these properties. So take a moment to think, what does this actually mean? So first off, this rule requires when persons are not responsible for their disabilities, the fair opportunity rule demands that they receive help to reduce or overcome the unfortunate effects of life's lottery of health. So life's lottery can capture both natural and social lottery. So natural lottery meaning the distribution of advantageous and disadvantageous genetic properties, whereas social lottery is the distribution of assets or deficits through family, property, school system, tribal affiliation, government agencies, and the like. So if we go back to fair opportunity rule, so the fair opportunity rule states that individuals should not receive social benefit on the basis of underserved advantageous properties. So looking at life's natural lottery, so looking at either natural lottery or social lottery, those that have advantageous properties, so if they were born into a well-to-do family, or if they have certain physical or mental attributes that are very advantageous, they shouldn't be given the benefits of fair opportunity. So fair opportunity is aimed at those who have, as Beacham and Childress put it, lost the natural lottery. So they have disadvantaged genetic properties, so properties that don't help them in today's society. Whether that can range from anything from genetic disease to pretty much anything. Whereas a social lottery was if you're born into a family who doesn't have lots of material possessions, or if you're born into a family where they live in a school system that isn't that great. That is what we're trying to overcome with fair opportunity rule. So Beacham and Childress argue that this system would give individuals with disabilities the fair opportunity to overcome or reduce their burdens. And they argue that a just system is one that aims to ameliorate these disadvantaged properties. So really make it a fair playing field for those who are not as fortunate in life's lottery. And theoretically, this should work to lessen the burden of life's lottery, as we thought. So how does this create a system of just distribution? So Beacham and Childress again argue that this is achieved only if the opportunity-reducing inequalities are first addressed. Though it's impossible to reduce every inequality in life's lottery, as you can imagine, just due to the nature of, I guess, if we take natural lottery, like some genetic diseases, you can't overcome that with fair opportunity, like a system of fair opportunity. So it's going to be very impossible to reduce all inequalities, but we're going to try to do our best to provide this fair playing field. Libertarians often critique that the fair opportunity rule is limited in what resources, and limited resources will constrain the implementation of this rule. So there's an infinite number of opportunities we can address, but we only have a finite number of resources. So if we think about that, we have to break up our gross domestic product into so many different aspects. So healthcare, education, public works. How can we try to make this a society's fair for everyone if we don't have unlimited resources, but we have unlimited needs? So some libertarian critique does maintain that some disadvantages are merely unfortunate, whereas others are unfair and therefore obligatory injustice to correct. The book gives an example of Tristan Englehart's position that, again, that some disadvantages are unfair, are merely unfortunate and not unfair, but we need to try to correct these unfair ones, so creating a fair system. So a merely unfortunate disadvantage would be say that if I wanted to be, let's say a basketball player, but I'm not tall enough or athletic enough, that would just be merely unfortunate. Whereas an unfair system would be if I had some disability that were to hinder my ability to, achieve my lifelong goals. Those are the ones that we should really strive to ameliorate. So justice in clinical trials. Why participate in a clinical trial? I mean, there's many different reasons. So you could be a virtuous person and try to participate in these trials just to better the healthcare of a society, of a population, just to do your part. But many reasons why, or a big reason why people participate in clinical trials is the financial reward. Beecham and Childress cite a study that said anywhere from 50 to 100% of participation in clinical trials is due to this financial gain. So is it really ethically permissible to allow individuals from vulnerable populations to participate in clinical research? I put vulnerable populations in quotations because Beecham and Childress like to argue that it's not right to categorically place someone into a category that considers them valuable. So not all elderly or not all prisoners or not all pregnant women or economically disadvantaged people are vulnerable. So we have to change our language and how we speak of it and speak in terms of specific vulnerabilities, not just categorically placing people into categories which make them vulnerable. So justice in clinical trials continued. So excluding economically disadvantaged people from clinical trials. So on one hand, it would just flat out eliminate the problem of unjust exploitation. That's not really reasonable because on the other side, it would deprive these individuals from the freedom to choose and would often be harmful to their financial interests. So a big point is that there's an increased risk of taking advantage of the economically distressed, though categorically excluding them would be unjust and paternalistic form of discrimination that might only lead to further marginalization, deprivation, and stigmatization. So if we just categorically discount or exclude these populations, historically vulnerable populations, from research, it's unjust and unethical because it may lead to further marginalization, deprivation, or stigmatization. Even in the when we're talking about economically disadvantaged people, this might be a very viable source of income. So if we disallow those people to not partake in or disallow them from partaking in clinical research, we might just lead to a more unjust situation. So how can we really assess whether or not researchers are taking advantage of the economically distressed? Beecham and Childress go through some of the moral issues associated with research on economically disadvantaged individuals. So we're just going to go through those a little bit and really go through an example to identify whether or not these are ethically permissible. So attractive monetary offers can often leave a person with a sense of being constrained to having no meaningful choice but to accept research participation. So Beecham and Childress present these three major moral problems with enrolling economically disadvantaged persons into clinical trials. So constraining situations, undue inducement, and undue profit. So we're going to go over this on the next slide, but it's important when analyzing cases concerning research on economically disadvantaged individuals that we must really think about these problems and whether or not the research falls into one of these categories, and therefore is highly likely that it would be unethical. So a constraining situation is a situation in which an individual feels controlled by the constraints of the situation rather than the design or threat of another person. So someone's not coercing you or forcing you to participate, but factors outside that realm, such as a lack of food, a lack of medical care, a lack of shelter, that you would really rely upon this money, are making it so that you feel controlled by the situation and don't have a free choice. Undue inducement is what we typically think of when we are thinking about research on economically disadvantaged individuals. So this is an irresistibly attractive offer in which a person assumes a risk of harm that he or she would not ordinarily assume. So, as you can imagine, risky research often carries a high reward, a high payout. So, if you're economically disadvantaged, this might be seen as a very attractive offer, say thousands of dollars, which might be a substantial part of your annual income. So they feel that they do not have a choice in that regards. And they're taking on this extra risk, these extra burdens that they wouldn't normally assume unless it was for this extra money. Whereas undue profit is kind of on the other hand of the other side of this undue inducement. So undue profit is too small a payment. These subjects receive an unfairly low payment while the sponsor of the research gains more than what is justified. So the sponsor knows that these subjects are not in a position to bargain because of their financial situation, and they feel that they can gain more profit by offering less money because they know that these subjects will accept whatever they can. So if they target financially not well-to-do subjects, they can reap more profit. So instead of giving like a standard $100 per visit, they think they could get away with offering maybe like 20 or less, and then the subjects will take it because they are financially hurting. So in this situation, researchers gain a lot more profit than what is justified and don't pass that on to the subjects. So an example, we looked at this case early on in the course. So a clinical research office is having trouble finding subjects for a trial for a new anti-diabetic medication, which has about a 12% chance of alopecia. So the trial pays $1,300 to subjects who complete all 6 visits, whether for taking the placebo or investigational drug. And also with this trial, the patients have to keep a log of their blood sugars and do some other extra work outside of their daily routine. So to enroll more subjects, the research company selectively advertises in sections of the cities that they know that have highest poverty levels. So we'll just say, for argument's sake, that these individuals' average yearly income is about $17,000. So $17,000, as you can imagine, is right around the poverty line for 100% of the poverty line for Ohio. So if these subjects get $13,000, that's a substantial amount of money. So which moral problem of including economically disadvantaged individuals in clinical research does this case invoke? So is it a constraining situation? It might be if these patients are so economically disadvantaged that they don't have access to medical care, or lack of food or shelter or other basic needs. It could fall into this category. But mainly we're looking again at this undue inducement. So it may be an irresistibly attractive offer in which a person assumes risk of harm that he or she would not normally assume. Even though these harm might not be very significant with this case, if the money was, the trial paid a little bit less, would they be willing to assume these burdens without that attractive financial gain of $1,300? It's just something to think about when we go through these kind of cases of dealing with justice and economically disadvantaged research subjects. So that's all I had for material. If you have any questions, just feel free to shoot me an email, or we can talk about it next week if you have other specific questions that don't come up till then. But here's just a roadmap for the remainder of the course. So next time we meet in a week from today, which is Monday the 1st, so Monday the 8th, we're going to have a TBL day on justice. So be sure to look at the study questions from both this week this previous week and this week's to be prepared for that TBL. So we'll do some cases as well. The following week, we're gonna finally finish up the 4 principles and go directly into professional patient relationships. During this week, we'll have a lecture. It'll be a very discussion-based lecture, so we'll come prepared to talk about lots of cases, short cases, and just have a good discussion and maybe turn one in case in at the end. And also we have the peer evaluation assignment that's going to go live that day. So a lot of the participation grade for the course comes from this peer evaluation. So you can either look at it as free points if you actively participated with your group and played a good role within the group, or it could hurt you quite substantially. So I'm going to go through this assignment a little bit more on the 15th, but the way it works is I'm going to give you a form online on Carmen where you go through and assign point values to each one of your teams. So if you're in a group of a team of 6, you're going to have to evaluate the 5 other members besides yourself and allocate a total of 20 points or 100 points between those 5 individuals. So if everyone played their part, just as an example, you would give everyone 20 points. But if one person felt did more of the work and one person did less of the work, you can allocate, say, split them between those 2 people, like 30 points to one person who did a lot of work and 10 points to someone who didn't a lot of work. But within this form, you can have any combination as long as it adds up to 100, and make sure that to give comments and it'll to give comments and your rationale why you gave each person this amount of whatever amount of points you did. So we'll go over that again on the 15th. The 22nd, so that 15th will be the last traditional class day. So on the 22nd, there will be a discussion board that will be due before class, and we'll have a guest speaker, Dr. Barbara Bressi, who was a bioethicist and previously a nurse, and she just retired a little bit ago, but she worked at Mount Carmel and was the lead bioethicist there. So she's going to come talk about some real-life cases and her perspective on professional patient relationships. So there will be probably an assignment attached to her coming to speak, but it'll be pretty short. And then also there'll be an extra credit due at midnight that night, going over a professional patient relationship case. So after that, that'll be our last meeting before the final exam, which is on the 26th, from 10 a.m. to 11:45 in the normal classroom. And there'll also be an extra credit due that night at midnight. So in the Refuting Your Team assignment, you will go back and look at 1 or 2 of your group's arguments that they presented, and you will refute them, give it a counter argument of why the group came to a conclusion you don't agree with. So it should be a nice, easy extra credit assignment to wrap up the semester with. So if you have any questions about this, give me an email or ask me about it next time we meet. So just again, more specific about next week, before class, be sure to do the discussion board. In class, we're going to do the IRAT, TRAT, some application cases. And we're also going to do something a little different. We're going to do an individual application case. So please, please, please bring a computer or a tablet or something you can type and submit an individual assignment on to Carmen. So again, IRAT, TRAT, group case, individual case, but please do bring a computer. If you don't, you'll probably have to handwrite it, and it just makes it a little harder to grade and submit. So please bring a computer or tablet. All right, well, thanks everyone for listening to this lecture, and let me know if you have any questions going forward.